Hello, everyone. Today we are going to talk about continents, how scientists once believed they were fixed in place, and how the idea completely changed with the development of continental drift and plate tectonics. Prior to the early 1900s, most scientists believed that continents were stationary. Mountains and oceans were thought to form only through vertical movements of the Earth's crust. That changed in 1915 when Alfred Wegener published The Origin of Continents and Oceans. In this paper, Wegener proposed a revolutionary idea. Continents are not fixed, they move. Interestingly, as far back as the 1600s, scientists had already noticed that the South American maps and the African maps looked a lot like puzzle pieces that could fit together. At the time that observation wasn't pursued, however, Wegener used that puzzle-like fit as one of the key pieces of evidence for his theory of continental drift. To help demonstrate Wegener's idea, I'm using a resource from the Florida Museum of Natural History. While it's originally designed for younger students, it works incredibly well for explaining this concept at any level. When we look at the continents, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, India, and Antarctica, we can start to see that Wegener noticed almost immediately. Africa and South America line up very well, especially when you include the continental shelf rather than just the modern coastline. But the coastlines weren't Wegener's only evidence. One of the strongest arguments came from fossils. Paleontologists at the time were finding fossils of the same plants and animals on both South America and Southern Africa. But the plants and animals were separated by huge oceans. One example was Mesosaurus, a small freshwater reptile found in both South America and Africa. Because it lived in fresh water, there was no realistic way it could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean. Similarly, the fern Glossopteris had very large, heavy seeds that would not have been able to be carried by the wind across vast oceans. These fossils are also found in South America, Africa, India, Australia, and Antarctica, meaning that at some point those continents were all connected. Another piece of evidence that Wegener noticed was the mountain belts and rock types that lined up across the continents across the Atlantic Ocean. For example, the Appalachian Mountains in North America have the same rock types and ages as the mountain ranges in Europe and Western Africa. These mountains are made of similar rocks formed at the same time and have the same geologic ages, which is a strong piece of evidence that they were once part of a single continuous mountain range. Another line of powerful evidence came from ancient climates. Coal deposits, which form from warm tropical swamps, are found today in places like eastern North America and Europe. These regions are nowhere near the equator today, yet coal can only form in hot, swampy environments. This suggests those continents were once located much closer to the equator. At the same time, scientists found glacial striations or scratches left by glaciers in southern Africa, South America, India, and Australia. These regions are now relatively warm, and glaciers couldn't have formed under today's climate conditions. Again, this only makes sense if continents were once positioned differently. To review, Wigner's main evidence included the jigsaw-like fit of the continents, the matching fossils across the ocean, the matching mountain belts and rock types across oceans, and ancient climate evidence. So despite all of this evidence, why was Wegener's idea initially rejected by the scientific community? One major issue that Wegener proposed was tidal forces as the mechanism that moved continents. Physicists showed early on that tidal forces were far too weak. More importantly, Wegener could also not identify the driving mechanism strong enough to move continents through solid rock. Without a mechanism, the scientific community rejected the entire theory. Wegener died just 15 years after publishing his work, never knowing that his idea would later become the foundation of modern geology. Everything changed after World War II in the 1960s, giving birth to plate tectonics. Advances in sonar allowed scientists to start mapping the ocean floor in detail for the first time. They discovered massive mid-ocean ridges and deep ocean trenches and learned that the ocean floor was much younger at the mid-ocean ridges than it was near the continental crust. Using radiometric dating, scientists found that the youngest rock occurred at mid-ocean ridges and became progressively older, moving away from those ridges on both sides. This was evidence pointing towards something called seafloor spreading. Another breakthrough came from the study of paleomagnetism, so studying the magnetism of old rocks. When molten rock cools, the magnetic minerals align with the Earth's magnetic field at the time that they cool. Scientists discovered there were symmetrical lines of reversing magnetic polarity in the rocks on either side of the mid-ocean ridges, and that they lined up equal to each other on either side, recording repeated magnetic pole reversals over time. These patterns could only be explained if new crust was forming at the middle at the mid-ocean ridges and moving outward and pushing the older rocks outward. These two discoveries led to the theory of plate tectonics. We now understand that the Earth's rigid lithosphere is broken into tectonic plates that float on a weaker, partially molten asthenosphere beneath them. There are 7 major plates, including the North American, South American, African, Eurasian, Australian Indian, Antarctic, and Pacific plates, which the Pacific plate is the largest of all of them. There are also several intermediate plates, such as the Nazca, Caribbean, Philippine, Arabian, and Juan de Fuca plates. The Pacific plate is the largest continental plate, and it's made of primarily oceanic crust. On the other hand, the Arabian plate is one of our intermediate plates, and it's quite a bit smaller, but it's made of primarily continental crust. There are 3 main types of plate boundaries: divergent, convergent, and transform. In divergent plate boundaries, the plates are moving away from each other. Convergent plate boundaries, the plates are moving towards each other. And transform plate boundaries, the boundaries are sliding past each other. In convergent plate boundaries, we have 3 different types of interactions because we have 2 different types of plates that interact with each other. So sometimes we have oceanic convergent plate boundaries where 2 oceanic plates are ramming into each other. Sometimes we have 2 continental plates that are ramming into each other. And then finally, we have places where the oceanic crust is converging with continental crust. So again, divergent plate boundaries are places where plates are moving apart, creating new crust. Some classic examples include the Mid-Atlantic Ridge in between Europe and North America and in between South America and Africa. That whole line is one large divergent plate boundary. It just so happens to surface at Iceland, where the land is pulling apart from each other. The other cool place is the East African Rift Zone, so kind of where the Horn of Africa is. Essentially, the Horn of Africa is starting to pull apart from the rest of Africa. In continental-continental collisions, where we have two continents running into each other, both continents are very low density. They kind of push upwards, making enormous mountains like the Himalayas. For oceanic continental boundaries and oceanic boundaries, whichever oceanic plate is denser, it will sink under the other plate that it's colliding with. So an example of oceanic continental subduction, or the sinking of one of those plates, results in volcanic mountains like the Cascade Mountains of the Pacific Northwest. For oceanic subduction, we get a subduction zone very similar to the oceanic continental boundaries, but instead of forming mountain ranges on a continent, they're forming volcanic islands. Another key feature at subduction zones are incredibly deep ocean trenches, like the Mariana Trench. The classic example of a transformed plate boundary is the Pacific plate sliding past the North American plate right through San Francisco and down by LA. So what about Hawaii? I just said that two oceanic plates meeting each other results in volcanic islands. Wouldn't that make sense that Hawaii is also a volcanic island chain? Actually, Hawaii sits on top of a hotspot. It's a stationary plume of magma that creates chains of volcanoes as the Pacific plate specifically, is sliding over top of this magma plume. Yellowstone is actually another example of a hotspot that is located under the continental crust. And you can see evidence of Yellowstone also moving as the North American plate slides over top of the hotspot. So what about the future? Plate tectonics tells us that the continents will likely continue to move. So in the next 50 million years, the Mediterranean Sea will likely close, eliminating both Italy and Greece, and Western California will likely be located just to the west of Washington and Oregon. But there's nothing to worry about. There's no danger because we won't be here in 50 million years. Plate tectonics is one of the most important theories in geology because it connects everything we study. So we have the concrete, very visible, touchable rocks and minerals that we study early on when we look at earth science. It also connects the landforms that we can see as we look outside of our home windows or if we're driving down the highway. In other words, it gives us that big picture, abstract, theoretical view of how the world works. And that's kind of why plate tectonics is such a big deal in earth science. Thank you so much for watching today. Please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoy learning about plate tectonics.